Hey everybody, Happy New Year to all the ladies and gentlemen and wombats out there in the world. Wanted to do this special edition release of an analysis of action cards and ranking, and we'll get into a little leader discussion too. So I'm hoping to keep this about 15 to 20 minutes. I do not have a script for this, so we will just see how it goes. I'm going to start off with my favorite Imperials, and then I'll do a separate video for the Rebels here shortly. So what I thought we would do is start with starting action cards, and I ranked them in order of how I value them. And then I also, so in this analysis, I want to consider the actual leader skills, like the icons, their Navy and Army strength, the missions that are attached to them. So this is kind of an all-encompassing idea here. So for starting action cards, I like Brilliant Administrator with Tarkin as my top overall pick because Tarkin's mission is so great. Fear will keep them in line. So anyway, I think this is the best, probably the best overall starting mission here. You can place Tarkin in Coruscant, and usually it's either loyal or subjugated. Oftentimes right on turn one if you don't have enough to subjugate. And then automatically get a Star Destroyer. If Corellia is loyal, this is extra good to do because Tarkin defends it against a Riken sabotage. So there's two blank sides to a dice. So if you stick Tarkin on a loyal Corellia, then there's a 33% chance a sabotage doesn't go off. And so the Rebels might pick a different spot. And if that's the case, then you get two Star Destroyers out of it. Second favorite card to see pop up is early promotion. I generally always take Mahdi, even if the other starting action card is not as good. There are a couple exceptions to the rule. If I have a bad starting action card and I don't have a lot to subjugate on turn one, and I do have a lot to subjugate on turn one, and I need Tarkin, then I will sometimes pass on Mahdi. The other downside to Mahdi is if you are lucky enough to draw Fear Will Keep Them in Line, that's a great card to put Tarkin on turn one. And if you spend Tarkin recruiting Mahdi on turn one instead, then that's not so great. Also, if you have early promotion and Brilliant Administrator in your hand on turn one, Tarkin can only do one of these two things. So if you have a loyal Corellia and a lot to subjugate, I might pass on early promotion and then take a different card instead. So this has more to do with the map layout and what Tarkin is doing on turn one more than anything else. But anyway, it's my second favorite starting card to see. After that is According to My Design with the Emperor. This is useful all sorts of times. If the Emperor's trying to get confronted, this is useful to play. It's a useful finishing card to play if you can. It's just great overall. Two fewer black dice, one fewer red dice is really nice for lots of reasons. The Emperor obviously has great starting icons, and Lure to the Dark Side is mostly a kind of gimmicky card, but not terrible to play all the time. More on that later. After these three, I like to see Track Them. Track Them is a way to get an extra action out of a leader. So you move something into a system, the rebels attack it, end up retreating, or you attack a rebel system and they end up retreating. Then you can use Track Them and then play that same leader again later on in the turn, maybe to attack the fleet that just retreated. This is a fairly easy card for the rebels to play around if they're aware of it. So oftentimes it has a the fear that you might have that might actually be better than the actual card itself. It might cause a rebel to not retreat because they don't want to free up your leader. After that is Tag. I really like Tag's mission card, Detained. I won't go too far into that right now. And his action card is it's situationally fairly good. What it does let you do is if you have Tag, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll play my ground combat cards freely early on, knowing I'm going to grab them back later, or space cards. Now it's either space or ground advanced combat cards that you're going to take back, so make sure to pick which one of the two you're likely to expend first. And then using tag to get the TIE Fighter card back, Swarm Tactics, for example, is really nice. I think generally it's better to use it on ground tactics because you'll be attacking with tag on the ground more often than in space, but could be used for either one there. Then my least favorite cards out of this are Lord Vader's. He has a mission that is okay and sometimes will buy you an extra turn, but it does require a captured leader. That goes well with his It Is Your Destiny card, which basically can, similar to Boba Fett's card, guarantee you can get a torture move off on a captured leader. So you have a captured leader, you keep Vader back in the pool, somebody tries to rescue them with, say, Daring Rescue, an intel mission, you block with Vader, the rescue succeeds, and then you capture the rescued leader. Now, the downside to this is unless you have another strong hero with icons that are relevant to the torture mission you're running, which a lot of them, like Carbonite, is a 3-fist icon. If you keep Vader back to block, you now cannot play Carbon Freeze. So, just some things to think about. So this card is very fiddly to play and doesn't get played a lot of the times, and therefore is my least favorite starting card. All right, so those are the action cards listed from top to bottom, Tarkin down to Vader. And now I've broken the other action cards into sets here. And then I've also ranked them top to bottom on here as well. So I'm going to start with kind of my overall favorite set to see. And that is this group, the Piet Veers kind of the Ready for Action group. So Piet, 3 Navy strength, 1 Army strength. Veers is the opposite. Piet has 2 intel and a fist. Veers only has 2 fists. Piet, in my opinion, is the much stronger hero out of the two, but this is a great card to see. Ready for Action. Ready for Action, essentially when you'll use it is when you're getting attacked and you think there's a decent chance you can win the fight, or at least you know you're not going to retreat. So a perfect example of this would be the Death Star is outside the Rebel base. The Rebels launch an attack. You can play Admiral Piet and Ready for Action to place Piet in the Death Star system because the Death Star is not retreating. That gives you 3 rerolls. You can fight the combat as normal, and then when the combat is over, Piet comes back. If the Rebels were defeated, you can then attack with that same Death Star group out to wherever the Rebels just came from. It's one piece that's important here is to note that you can't retreat. So if you have a lone Star Destroyer getting attacked, you often don't want to play Ready for Action. You just want to play Piet, try to roll the repairs and the blocks, and then retreat and not have the extra action to get him back. So Ready for Action is a great card. Love to see it. If I already have Piet, I will still take this card with Veers, and then oftentimes use both of Piet's cards. The other cards here are Keep Them From Escaping and Target the Generators. Keep Them From Escaping is really nice because it can throw the Rebels off. Oftentimes Rebels will attack a system that has Navy and Army in a system with the idea of they're going to wipe your Navy and then retreat their starfighters back to base or whatever before they can get counterattacked. If you have a Star Destroyer or an assault carrier that's going to go down to a Rebel attack, but it's supported by neighboring Navy units, you can wait for the Rebels to attack, play Piet, keep them from escaping, and then counterattack into that system because the Rebels are stuck there and weren't able to retreat, and then Piet can lead that attack as well. That's especially nice against Moncals because a lot of the times they'll attack, retreat, and then try to prepare for battle or cycle their combat cards to get their fleet logistics card back. So this is a underrated card, and Piet is such a great hero as well. I'm not a huge fan of his action card. It's nice, but is not anywhere near as useful as Veers' action card, Planetary Conquest. Not going to explain that one too much here. But the other thing to keep in mind with Veers is if you're playing the Rote deck, Exploit Weakness is a 2 strength card, and there aren't a lot of Imperial leaders that have 2 strength icons or more. So sometimes it will be worth taking Veers. Generally, the only time I take Veers is if I have Planetary Conquest already in hand. Or maybe if the Rebels are playing a ground game and they have a couple of shield generators and I know I'll need to wipe a shield generator. This can also be used to wipe an ion cannon, which then can give you more red dice to roll, but Veers is obviously not a great admiral, he's a general. So yeah, Piet over Veers in general. But I love this set overall, I think. Let's talk about kind of the opposite of these. We've got Moff Gerard and Admiral Ozzel on here. Now, Ozzel, like in the movie, is far less talented than Piet. 2 combat strength instead of 1 intel instead of 0, but he does have logistics, and he does have what I consider to be the best action card in the game, Catch Them by Surprise. So Catch Them by Surprise allows the Imperial player a move before the Rebels can trigger in action, meaning if the Rebels are 1 point away from victory and and they're holding on to major victory in their hand, let's say, as a combat objective, and you're right outside the Rebel base, without Ozzel, the Rebels will attack, kill 3 of your TIE fighters, score major victory, and then the game's over. Or you can play Ozzel's Catch Them by Surprise, seize the initiative, and attack the base early. This can be used in all sorts of instances. You can move the Death Star to a shield bunker before a plan the assault's coming. You can move something over a raid outpost objective to make sure they're not grabbing it. All sorts of ways we can use this, but this is by far the best action card in the game. I also really love Ozzel's Probe Droid Initiative card. You just draw 4 probe cards for free. And, not all of them are going to be great, but 2 or 3 of them probably will be pretty useful. So if you think of, remote planets as a action that you need to spend, you have a limited number of actions you can do per turn. If you have 5 leaders, you can do 5 actions. You can explore 5 planets. Well, instead, if you use Probe Droid Initiative with Ozzel, you might draw 3 or 4 planets you don't have. And if those are remotes, those are now actions you don't necessarily need to spend going. So I really like that this is an automatic, non-blockable mission. I think this mission's great. Less exciting is Moff Gerard, who has double their efforts. That card is okay. I do like fully operational. I think it gives the ability for the Death Star. It adds some survivability to the Death Star. And I think proceeding as planned is okay as well, especially if you're behind. You can just build a Superstar Destroyer or Interdictor. Fully operational is nice because if the Rebels are planning the assault or doing a public uprising with a Nebulon and a couple of X-Wings, you can wipe the Nebulon and you have a much greater chance of surviving that initial trench run. All right, let's shift over to Krennic and Krennic's Finest. This is probably my 3rd favorite group out of the mix here. Secret Facility, I like this card better than the other 2 because it gives you the flexibility of Krennic or Krennic's Finest. Now, it's important to note Krennic has 3 intel and Krennic's Finest has 4 strength icons, right? Krennic is a nice overall commander at 2/2. He's like a Han Solo. Krennic's Finest is a ground general level skills. But the Empire starts out lacking intel. Okay, so what does that mean? So the Emperor has 2 intel, Teg has 0, Vader has 0, and Tarkin has 1. So whereas the Emperor has 3 diplomacy and Vader has 3 strength, Krennic has 3 intel and can run both Secure the Plans and also, I should have copied this one up here as well, he can also run missions like Homing Beacon or Interrogation Droid. other things that require 3 intel sets. Most importantly, Secure the Plans is oftentimes a game breaker card, so this is a great mission. Secret Facility gives you the ability to cover a space where the rebels currently are. So let's imagine the rebels have a loyal Ryloth, and you draw the Ryloth probe in Secret Facility. You can cover Ryloth during a build turn or a deploy round without having to get any troops there. It's fantastic. I love the card, really good. I like that better than Sweep the Area, which is like Secret Facility except for capturing a leader. And Lord Vader's orders are nice for the purpose of determining if the rebels have Death Star plans or not. That's where I find it to be the most useful. I'm not going to talk through that too much. I do like Draw Them Out with Krennic's Finest, but I almost never play Krennic's Finest on it. Typically, you'll have Tag draw somebody out and Krennic's Finest capture. Or, maybe Krennic's Finest is on a Planetary Conquest after you draw out Chewbacca with Tag. Something along that lines. It's also, again, for the same reason Krennic is valuable because of his 3 icons. There are not a lot of Imperials with 2 strength icons, so Exploit Weakness is usable, Carbon Freeze is usable, and Planetary Conquest is usable as well. I should probably put a copy of Carbon Freeze over here for Finest. So when you're recruiting leaders, you often want to think about what missions are you not able to run, especially if one of your leaders was confronted. Like, let's say Vader was confronted. Well, if given a choice between Piet or Krennic's Finest, in a vacuum, I probably pull Piet. But if I need to get Carbon Freeze or Planetary Conquest out, there's value to having Krennic's Finest, even though he may not be in a vacuum the better leader out of the group. Which leads me to my next section to talk about, Jabba the Hutt and Admiral Mahdi. So again, Admiral Mahdi is going to most of the time be a first round only hero. Very rarely do I use Ambitions of Power to pull Mahdi on his own. The exception to that is if I already have, say, Jabba, or say I have Boba Fett and Janice already. Adding Jabba means I now have 3 leaders that can't move, so sometimes it might make sense to grab Mahdi just for the movement ability. But Jabba is generally the better hero out of the group. Ambitions of Power, obviously, typically only good if you have Mahdi in the pool already, or if you're playing the rote deck, so it's kind of fiddly there. Post Bounty is okay, with the idea that anything that gives you an option to move Rebel Reputation back is nice. Post Bounty is often best served with the card that lets you block missions, subterfuge, not subterfuge, whatever that's called. You put Jabba on that mission. Somebody tries to gather intel. You block it. It fails. You roll 3 dice and a little one because of the extra mission dice, and then you send Krennic's Finest out to capture the person who just infiltrated because they had to do it over an Imperial unit. And now you have the gained reputation, and even if they incite rebellion or something, you have Jabba's skill sets to try to block the mission, and even if you end up losing a leader, you've still gained a full turn by setting them back a reputation point. So post bounty can be nice. Also, Jabba opens up a number of other missions that no other Imperials besides the Emperor can run. So Message from High Command, which is 3 diplomacy, Display of Power, which is 3. Also, intels are nice, Wear the Bait and Homing Beacon. And it's also nice to play them on trade negotiations and deployment as well. Deployment is tricky because oftentimes if you think you know where the rebel base is, you might deploy there. And if the Emperor goes there, well, you've just sacrificed the Emperor for an easy confrontation. So spending Jabba the Hutt on a deployment can feel a little bit better there. And then Mahdi has Discredit Rebellion. I don't think anybody loves that card, but I will typically play it if I do not have Ambitions of Power right before I sacrifice Mahdi, if there are a lot of sabotages on the board. Gives you like a 33% chance of setting reputation back, so definitely possible. All right. Let's move over to Boba and Janice. Same sort of idea. Neither one of these leaders can move armies around, which is the most important thing for the Empire to do. So I typically don't like these leaders, but for whatever reason, I tend to draw these cards in groups. So I'll draw like Blindside and Public Support together. So sometimes you just have to take one. Janice is often referred to as the weakest leader out of the group. Excuse my dog, it's dinner time. Come here, bub. Janice is often referred to as the weakest leader out of the group, but Imperial Propaganda is such an amazing card that if you're sitting on it, oftentimes I have a tell. If I recruit Janice, it typically means I'm sitting on Imperial Propaganda and I'm going to play it. For the same reason that Jabba is good on deployment, Janice is also good on deployment. Better to lose him than the Emperor. And then trade negotiations is nice too. Public support, okay. Don't typically use it very often. And then Boba Fett is the stronger out of the two leaders, often because the rebels aren't really sure what he's on. He might just be gathering intel, or he might be running collect bounty or capture or carbon freeze. Without Boba Fett and without Krennic's Finest, it is difficult to run, a capture and a carbon freeze, or a collect bounty and a carbon freeze on the same turn. If you do have, Vader and Boba, you can run Boba on collect bounty turn 2 and Vader on carbon freeze, and that's almost a guaranteed success on there because you're rolling, you're rolling 3 plus 2, and oftentimes, unless the rebels also grab Chewbacca on their first hero pick, that's just likely to go through. Blindside is nice because they can't block it. So in that Chewbacca scenario, you could play collect bounty with Blindside, although Chewbacca would probably block carbon freeze. And Boba Fett wear is very similar to the Destiny card for Vader in the sense that you can have a captured leader, you can place Boba Fett there during the action phase, and then the rebels cannot open with a rescue. So they can still block, but you're more likely to get your carbon freeze off because, number one, Boba Fett's already there, and number two, the leader can't be rescued. So that's often what that card is used for. You can also use it to protect the Death Star if you're pretty sure, say, Dodonna and Wedge are on a mission and the Death Star is undefended and you think it's playing the assault. You can play Boba Fett wear on the Death Star as long as the Death Star is in an Imperial system. You can't do it if it's in a remote system or if it's over a neutral planet. So little fiddly there. Boba Fett also has the ability to run these strength missions, which is nice, especially if Vader is confronted. And last but not least, or maybe least, let's talk about Yularen and Soontir over here. Good intel, terrible card. Very few times where I find that to be useful. I do like Soontir's Hunt Them Down card, and Soontir also has 2 strength icons. So kind of the opposite of Piet, 2 strength, 1 intel instead of 2 intel, 1 strength, and he's only a 2 navy skill instead of a 1. But Soontir has a great action card, Scouting Mission, which lets you grab 4 TIE fighters and put them into any system. You can use this to try to wipe a Mon Cal, or to throw the rebels off their game, or to take out a lone Y-Wing, or to cover a raid outpost that you think is going to get hidden fleeted, or to, go to where the Death Star is to put extra TIE fighters in case of a plan the assault, which also gives you an extra intel icon to block. Lots of flexibility with Scouting Mission. And then Yularen is great, partially because he's a 2/2, so flexible for attacking and defending, and also Local Rumors is obviously great for identifying where the rebel base is. His secret, underrated ability is that he has 3 intel. So in addition to being able to run Interrogation Droid, he can also do Homing Beacon or We're the Bait. He can also win gather intel rolls against Leia. So if you have Yularen, oftentimes the rebels will not block with Leia if you gather intel, and they might save her for whatever mission Tarkin's on, which if that ends up being R&D, you've done great. All right, so that is my overview of leaders and some things to think about when you're recruiting. Now let's get into the rankings. A level tier. So you can see I tried to do this like a pyramid, right? I did this with like groups of 3 at first, and I thought, nah, let's pyramid it. I like that a little better. So Catch Them by Surprise is my only A level tier card. This is the one I would prefer more than any other card in a vacuum. If you said pick one card that you are guaranteed to get every game, I would pick Catch Them by Surprise. Second would be Soontir and Scouting Mission. Soontir, not a fantastic leader, but not terrible either. And being able to move those 4 TIE fighters around is super flexible, offensively or defensively. Then I have Ready for Action, also as a B-level card. Take this leader and place them into the system. They can't retreat, but you get them back at the end of the round. Basically gives you extra rerolls in a critical battle, and then gives your fleet a better chance of surviving, and then you can attack with that same fleet afterwards. C-level tier, so we've got A, B, C. I put 1 in A, 2 in B, 3 in C. I listed Secret Facility. It's not always good, but fairly flexible card, can prevent deployment and production. You can also move the Death Star over a remote location and pop Secret Facility on there, and now it's covered. Local Rumors. This seems, I feel like a lot of people would probably put this in B tier. The downside with Local Rumors for me is if I think the base is on Endor and I have only, say, a single unit in Mustafar, and I'm trying to figure out if I need to bring my fleet down, and I play Local Rumors there, and they say, yeah, the base is in Endor. Okay, great. I'm like 5 moves away from getting there, and by then they can spell up a rapid and everything else. So, I think not. Yeah, I think on the surface level, this seems like a B level, but I'm actually keeping it as C. And then Keep Them from Escaping, again, can really throw the rebels off their game, but situationally. There are times when I'll take this card and not play it all game. All right, D level tier, and D is, goes all the way down to double F. So D is actually like not bad tier here as well. Gerard is nice because he gives the Death Star extra protection. So the Death Star can be protected by shield bunkers, an interdictor, and then to a lesser extent fully operational. So if I see my opponent has Gerard and I'm debating should I public uprising where the Death Star is and count on the Nebulon saving the 2 X-Wings, well, if he's got Gerard, he'll just play it, block the uprising, and if he fails the uprising block, then he will just blow up the Nebulon and you don't even get to play the card. So it's a nice protect the Death Star card. In a similar idea, Post Bounty is situational, but can gain you an extra turn. So fully operational can gain you an extra turn by saving the Death Star. Post Bounty can gain you an extra turn by setting the rebels back a reputation point. Ambitions of Power, I think some people would probably put this in C. I'm keeping it in D because it's kind of case by case. I think it's stronger in the rote deck because of promotion and higher mercenaries, so something to be said there. Proceeding as Planned, this is a nice catch-up card. Also, I like Proceeding as Planned because you can take Ozzel and not play Proceeding as Planned, but the rebels might think you have Catch Them by Surprise and will play that way accordingly. Also, Ozzel's Probe Draw mission is great. So sometimes if I start with Ozzel's Probe mission card and this comes up, there are situations where I will take this and risk not getting the best Catch Them by Surprise card at a later point just to get Ozzel's probe missions off, or probe draws off. All right, into tier E, we've got Sweep the Area. It can be good, depends on what your probes are. You just try to pick places where you think rebels are going to go run missions at. Lord Vader's Orders, better if you're looking at level 2 objectives, but not terrible. Boba Fett Wear, again, can save the Death Star in a pinch, can guarantee a carbon freeze gets pulled off, but often needs other things to happen first before they're set up. Blindside, maybe this should have been D tier. It just prevents Leia from blocking a mission, basically. So you could put Boba on a capture or gather intel, and Leia or Chewie won't block it. Same with Janice. It makes Janice a little bit better if you have Blindside because you can rule by fear and ensure it's not blocked. F tier, I have public support and target the generator. Target the generator are useful, like there are many times when I wish I had target the generator, but those are often the very last move of the game, and sometimes you don't have that luxury of keeping Veers around that whole time. Same as public support, often a last move of the game type card to try to bolster your forces. You know, not great, would rather have other cards. And last but not least, good intel. Now, there are many games where I've taken Yularen and good intel. There are almost no games where I've taken Soontir and good intel. Again, the three intel icons great for Yularen, so sometimes it still makes sense to take good intel, even though its action card is not the best. So I would love to hear in the comment section, what are your A and B tiers? Let's not go all the way through because, I mean, that's a lot to read. But let me know what your A tier card is after this analysis and your B tier cards. Take into consideration, you know, the leaders, their skills, their icons, the missions they have that go with them. And let me know which one's your A and which two are your B. All right, guys, I hope you have a happy new year. There's that dinner bell again. I'm going to go feed my dog. Everybody stay safe tonight, and I'll see you next year.